And would you like to leave a tip today? Otherwise, I'm not making rent.
I'll be right back with that for you.
Anyone who's worked a service job understands. Culturally, we act like tips are doing workers a favor. But the fact that we have jobs that don't pay enough to live up front is frankly appalling and an insult and injury to those of us working those jobs. It forces us to perform for a living. Like, I can't just make people coffee and sandwiches in peace. And our federal government basically does nothing to stop employers from grossly underpaying us. The current federal minimum wage is a measly $7.25 per hour and hasn't been raised since 2009. And after accounting for inflation, minimum wage is the lowest it's been since 1955, almost 70 years ago. The federal minimum for tipped workers is only $2.13 per hour, which hasn't increased since 1991. Instead of making weak election promises to give a tax break on tips, our politicians should guarantee everyone a living wage if they really care about working people like they say they do. Why do we even have a separate tipped wage scale? Why is tipping the expectation for workers to survive? It was never a norm, not until after the Civil War. After 1865, the end of slavery marked a major shift in the economic character of the US, as Black people were finally entitled to pay for their labor. The slaveocracy was defeated in the Civil War, but much of their power remained entrenched, and they set out to undermine the development of Black economic and political power. Aside from tenant farming and convict labor, many Black workers were hired to work only for the tips they could get on the job. Black workers were paid little and essentially needed to suck up to white customers, leaving the deep cultural and social impact that we see today. In 1938, when the labor movement was on the verge of winning the Fair Labor Standards Act, Southern Dixiecrats, determined to uphold Jim Crow, forced the passage of compromise legislation with a long fine print. Although this legislation guaranteed a minimum wage and overtime pay, it specifically excluded agricultural and domestic workers, most of whom were Black. At that time, 3/4 of all Black workers, mostly in the South, fell into one of these two categories. These laws trapped Black workers in poverty, making sure they were still living off of nothing but tips. In the same decade that Congress was writing Black workers out of the Fair Labor Standards Act, Black service workers were organizing and fighting back for a living wage and dignity on the job. Sleeping car porters for the Pullman Car Railroad Company were an entirely Black workforce who had to put in endless hours to provide white customers with flawless service for grueling shifts, often up to 20 hours. They received minimum pay and relied on tips. The workers could also be fired at any time if a customer decided that they didn't like the way they spoke to them or looked at them. Sick and tired of these indignities, they formed the first recognized Black labor union, the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, winning their first contract in 1937. And in that contract, they won those higher base wages, along with health benefits and a pension, not to mention union recognition. The struggle by service workers for a living wage is alive today, and unions are still the key for these workers to organize and win a better life. The Union of Southern Service Workers is organizing the lowest paid workers in the South today, where well over 1 in 3 tipped workers are. They have been organizing across the industry and demanding that fast food giants like Waffle House stop abusing tipped minimums to pay poverty wages. After months of campaigning and targeted strikes at Waffle House, USSW won historic raises earlier this summer. Workers will no longer scrape by at $2.75 an hour and instead receive at least $7.25, with many gaining more than that. The fight to win union recognition and to raise the standards for the entire service industry in the South continues. No matter what industry, we all deserve a living wage and should be able to afford a dignified life. Black workers in the South have always been at the forefront of this struggle, showing us that we'll only get it if we fight for it.